Hi there, I'm Jake. I'm a park ranger here in the Blind Eternities. You know, I don't think there's any wrong way to explore the world of Magic the Gathering, but I think most people fall into one of three main categories. The first category are the people that like roughing it, living off the lands, taking only what they need and using what they find along the way. These people draft their cards or crack packs, building their decks from their existing collection, slowly upgrading over time and finding new mechanics that they can fit into their existing structures. The second group believe in the right tool for the job. They prep for months, theory crafting, finding which cards work together, which planes they need to travel to find the exact right spells, to tackle that summit. They strive for the pinnacle of competitive play. They craft their deck from scratch with mechanics in mind, so that once they start actually buying cardboard, they know where they're going. They know that once they have their deck assembled, they're ready to compete. And the third group is somewhat a balance of the two. But I think there's an extra aspect. These are people that care about the experience. It's not just about finding cards along the way, but finding a connection to the cards, telling a story, finding mechanics that fit into the way they want their deck to play. These are people that care about the path and not just the destination. Today we're going to talk about how we balance mechanics and theme in a Magic the Gathering deck. And hopefully, by the end of this, you'll be able to find your perfect campsite. So one of the questions I frequently hear with regards to Magic the Gathering is, why Commander? Right? What drives Commander to the forefront of most Magic the Gathering communities? What caused it to take off over all of the other community formats that exist and all of the other sanctioned tournament formats that exist? And I think the answer is simple. It's one word. It's theme. You build your deck with a theme. Whether that's your commander or the way that you want your deck to play or the story you want your deck to tell, Commander has a theme. And even at extremely competitive decks, extremely competitive tournaments and gameplay all has a certain theme to it, because you are building your deck around that particular commander. If you're building a really competitive Sisay deck, sure, it's going to have some of the same Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora cards that are good in all 5 color decks, but you're going to have some enchantments and planeswalkers and other legendary stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else, because you're building around those specific mechanics. At any level in Magic, when you are playing Commander, I think you're telling a story. And sometimes that story is what the pre-con is designed to tell. The mechanics that come pre-packaged, pre-built, and ready to play. But other times, you craft it from scratch. And I think that with Magic cards, you can tell any story. It's one of the reasons why if you get online and search Dark Magician Magic the Gathering, you are inundated with a sea of custom Dark Magician cards made as legendary creatures with a Magic the Gathering border. Because people want to play as Yugi on the table. And when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, you don't really get that. Building a Dark Magician deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Using that archetype is centered around cycling Dark Magician to your hand, field, and graveyard, being able to get out Dark Magician Girl and various other overlay creatures and fusion creatures that deal a lot of damage and care about spell cards. But that's not really what the Dark Magician was. The Dark Magician was the final nail in the coffin, ending the game instantly. It was an extremely powerful creature that everyone respected, right? The ultimate wizard in terms of power and that whole thing. And Yugi's deck was built as a hodgepodge collection of lower level monsters that slowly ramp up into that Dark Magician to finish the game. But you can do that in Magic. If you have a Dark Magician as your commander, you can build your deck around it. You can go a sort of Dark Magician archetype style deck in Magic using something like Inala as the commander and reskin that as the Dark Magician. Now it powers up all of your other wizards that come into play, all of the other things that you can do over the course of the game, finally ending it by playing out your commander and going for the win. You can build your Dark Magician deck using Idris as the Dark Magician, using the cascade mechanic to wipe out your opponent in one big turn as soon as you get that attack through. There's a variety of different mechanics and stories that you can tell in Magic that you don't get in other games. When you are hard restricted by the evolution lines in Pokemon, the specific colors in One Piece, and the mechanics specifically contained within certain sets of cards within the One Piece trading card game, when you are restricted by the different elements and things like universes and Keyforge and a few of these other games, it doesn't feel like you can tell the story you want to tell. It feels like the best you can do is win. And Commander allows you to do more than that. But when we're building a Commander deck and we want to have that theme, how do we balance it? If we build purely on theme, your deck isn't going to function. But if we build purely on mechanics, you're not really going to necessarily tell the story you want to tell. So balancing that can be tricky. I'd say if you want to have a consistent theme through your deck, the easiest place to start is the Commander. And it's not necessarily that you need a Commander that you purely build around, a sort of Voltron strategy or a combo strategy, but just a Commander that sets the tone for the deck. A good example for this, for me, is my Yurlok deck. The entire deck is old bordered. I call it Party Like It's 1999, and the theme of the deck is taking the rules of Magic back to where it was in 1999. We turn Mana Burn back on. We remove a lot of the artifact tokens and things that you use to get ahead, and we limit the amount of searching and shuffling that people have to do. So you're a little bit more reliant on what you draw and what you have in play. The deck's not quite Group Slug, but it's kind of on its way just to tone the game down a little bit, just a couple of decades. And it's kind of fun to play. It really does change the landscape on which you were playing the game, and that's what I was going for. It's not a particularly heavy-handed theme, and it doesn't all tie into that specific theme, but it's just to evoke something, just to bring that to the forefront. And I think that's a really effective way to theme a deck. So when you are thinking of how you want your theme to work, don't commit your entire deck to it. Really, you only need maybe 30 to 40 cards throughout the entire deck, including lands that fall on that theme that tie into that a little bit. So when you build a theme deck, obviously the Commander is a really easy place to start, but where else can we look for this theme? Sometimes it comes from something a little bit simpler, something not tied to the cards themselves, but more the style. I have an Atraxa deck that I didn't want to be just a regular bog standard Atraxa deck, so I've adjusted it and changed every card in the deck for only showcase variants. It is designed to be a very pretty deck. A lot of different frames, a lot of no frames, a lot of weird secret layer cards, just so it looks very different. Mechanically, all of these cards are cards that you would find in an Atraxa deck. So it's got some infect stuff, a little bit of toxic stuff, planeswalkers, a variety of +1/+1 counter interactions, and some combos that can pop off with that. But for the most part, it's just pretty. And that was my theme. Pretty cards. And it does cut out a lot of the other weird older cards that don't really have special versions, special variants. So you are using a suboptimal list, but still fitting that theme and fitting the mechanical requirements of that Commander. So today I want to take a look at one of my decks that I think is the best representation of balancing mechanics and theme. Everything ties in. Everything is built around this extremely narrow theme and restriction that I've placed on myself. And it's because I've chosen this extremely narrow theme that I have tried to optimize this deck just about as far as it'll go. Today we are going to look at my Adventure Time deck. This is Finn and Jake, as Halden and Paco, the partner commanders, with a Karuga companion as Tree Trunks. And this deck is themed on Season 1, Episode 4 of Adventure Time. The episode is titled Tree Trunks, and it's all about adventuring. So I think with a deck like this, we obviously want to start our discussion looking at the commanders themselves and talking about what we are trying to accomplish with this deck. Obviously, we are theming the deck around adventure time, so we want adventures to be front and center in the deck. The way that we can use these adventures is kind of unique, because Paco, this is Jake, has the ability to exile cards off the top of each player's library, including yourselves, and he gets +1/+1 counters for every non-creature card exiled this way, but they all get fetch counters on them. Now see, that's relevant because when Halden is in play, you can cast all of the non-creature spells exiled with Paco. But there's a slight adjustment to this that we need to make, that it's not just casting non-creature cards, it's non-creature spells. This means any adventure cards that are also non-creature spells, you can cast the adventure half. This allows you to take advantage of a lot of the permanents that you are exiling off the top of your library, even though normally you wouldn't be able to cast them with Halden. Now we combine this with Tree Trunks, which forces us to only play mana cost 3 and up, but gives us a significant amount of card draw available on demand. So there's two things that we need to keep in mind here. We want to make sure that our deck has a wide variety of non-creature spells that we can cast essentially for free off of Paco. So we're not too afraid of exiling cards off the top of our library. But second, everything needs to be mana cost 3 or higher. So in our adventure cards, you'll notice that a lot of them have a fairly high casting cost, but a fairly low adventuring cost. This allows us to pretty quickly get rid of all of the things that have been exiled with Paco while taking advantage of the lands and other non-creature spells that were exiled off of our opponent's deck. Over the course of a game, we should have a handful of cards floating in exile from either the adventure half or from Paco himself, and so being able to capitalize on cards cast from exile is also a key part of the deck. Now there's a wide variety of ways to play this out, but I will admit most of the games that I win are won off the back of Paco doing combat damage. So let's look at a few of the cards that care about things being cast from exile. Most of these are to protect ourselves and put additional tokens into play, or buffing the creatures that we do have. Getting to the late game is obviously going to be the trickiest part of this exercise, and so we are running a variety of ways to protect ourselves and draw additional cards. But the rest of the deck is filled out, you can see, with a variety of other utility things that allow us to play extra lands, attack extra time, or just clear the board when we get behind. We are not dependent on having a lot of cards in play, and frequently just having Paco is enough to get ahead and win the game. So cards that allow us to buff Paco and get additional attacks with additional untaps are really critical here. Getting into the late game, we have a few ways of closing it out with alternate versions of Paco and a few other cards that just close the game out on their own. With a deck like this, we definitely need a solid mana base, and so we definitely didn't hold back on the level of mana base that we are running, with a variety of dual lands also included. I'll have this entire list in the description, so if you do want to go through the entire list, you are welcome to. But I think this deck is really fun, and it's definitely a good representation of a strict theme placed on a fairly proactive mechanical deck. I really enjoy playing this Finn and Jake deck, and I think it can be really successful while still feeling very inclusive in this adventure time theme. Finally, one note that I will make with a deck like this: you may notice that this is entirely built from proxy cards that were printed and custom templated by myself, and whenever I print a deck like this, I want to have a little bit of flexibility for subbing other cards in and out. So I do have a variety of other cards that were printed as a part of this print run to give me a little bit of flexibility and options while deck building to try to adjust the way that the deck plays over time. For the most part, this allows me a good way to tailor the deck as I discover new, better lines and ways of playing it, but more importantly, I can adjust the power level of this deck to go from fairly casual to fairly powerful. Obviously, this is never going to be competitive, and even at high-powered tables, it will struggle. But I can make the deck significantly more powerful than just its basic form using some of those extra sideboard sub-in cards. I've talked about it in the past, but I really like the idea of having a good sideboard in a commander deck. So I would encourage you, the next time you set out to build a deck, to put a little bit of thought into what theme you are trying to evoke, how you want the deck to play, what you want your opponents to experience over the course of a game. And that can be as casual or competitive as you want, because there's a lot of space in a commander deck to fit the cards that tell the story you want to tell. And even at extremely competitive levels, there's probably a deck that does what you want it to do. And reskinning something like I did with this adventure deck, I think goes a long ways towards telling that story. Thanks for watching.